It's Cam from the future here. This is part 3 of our big Insidious series. We recorded one big marathon-long podcast episode, but for YouTube, we're splitting them up into more digestible chunks. So this is the final part of that discussion, discussing the new film in the Insidious saga, the big finale, Insidious: The Red Door. This is part 3. If you missed the previous 2, they should be the previous 2 videos on the channel. Enjoy the discussion. And now we get to move on to Insidious: The Red Door, the third and final film in the Lambert Family saga, the sort of mainline franchise here.
Yeah, there are other Insidious movies, but just following these characters. Yeah.
So I've got points here, jotted down, jump in. Obviously, this is sort of assembled from us talking in the car, but it's also my own stuff. It's also the other things we talked about here. So I think we should start with Patrick Wilson as the director here. Yeah,
I was a little nervous.
Yeah,
to be honest.
Course.
I mean, I was nervous for a lot of reasons for this movie, but I was nervous. I was like, oh, what if it's like, we both said like, we don't want it to suck, not only because it would be disappointing for us, but because it would be disappointing for Patrick Wilson. Like,
of course,
we like him as an actor and we want him to be successful. And, you know, and this is like a big deal for like, Insidious
it's his debut, sure.
It's huge for his career.
Right.
And so like in terms of like this franchises. And so him directing this, I was really nervous about it. I was like, what if it's not good?
Right. And luckily,
what if it's a Chad Lowe situation? Do you know what I mean?
But even if he was good, you have to follow 2 James Wan horror masterpieces.
Right,
in
that's
your
the other
first
thing.
movie?
Yeah, it's not only that he's directing a movie, it's he's following James Wan.
Right. So it's an incredible compliment to say the movie's great.
Yeah.
Because it stands up next to the other 2.
It sure do. Like, it feels different. It doesn't feel like the other 2 do, but it's still excellent.
And it works because the characters, I mean, it's 10 years later, 9 years later, whatever, but the characters are nowhere near the same place they were before.
Right.
Most of the cast is gone or dead or all the terrible things we've seen that have happened.
Right.
So the shift there works. And I think as a director, you can see the different things he pays attention to versus James Wan.
But what makes it like feel like it's not like this totally new thing is that it's the same principal cast.
Sure.
And it's about the same family storyline and it's reflecting on the events of the first 2 movies.
It's as immersed in that world.
I think the choice to like the fact that they got those 2 kids to come back as adult actors was so huge in making this movie successful. Because they could have just recast it, some other brown-haired kids, but they got the same ones, and I think that was perfect.
Yes, it's that all hands on deck thing. It's like a family reunion,
especially when
bad things happen.
When Dalton is on the cover, he's on the poster for Insidious. Like we've seen his face a million times, even though he's asleep for half the movie. We were joking, we're like, so was his audition just laying down? But anyway, when he is acting on screen, he's great. But we're so used to seeing his face. So for him to then be the main character of this movie is perfect.
And I thought the way the movie was shot, I get the sense that as a director, Patrick Wilson has this intense, I mean, obviously coming from the actor's background, has an intense interest in performance. There was a beautiful prioritization and exploration of faces, contortions of expression and angles. I noticed particularly with his own face, because he's sort of a co-lead here with Dalton.
Yeah, he is.
He seemed so thrilled and so free in making Josh look really ugly and warped, showing his face totally kind of torn up and twisted from the strangest, most unnerving angles.
Right, but like not in the like he's being possessed by a demon way of the second one, but
the discomfort, the intimacy, the horrible things that were happening.
And just the age, like the time that's passed. Right. He's older now.
Right, there was a real prioritization of the performance, the characters, the age, the expression, the movement. And along with the footage that they've like kind of tactfully reused from the previous movies, you build up this incredible investment in these characters. You're so close to them that you feel what they're thinking.
Yeah.
You see everything they're doing so clearly. We have a real history with these characters going into this film. That's what I was holding on to as we kind of sat down here.
But it so wasn't like fan servicey nostalgia, because I mean it's horror, so there's only so much of that kind of thing you could dig into anyway. But like it could have been this like weird like, oh, remember remember when we made that great movie 13 years ago? It wasn't doing that at all. It was just tapping into how great this story is as a whole.
And let's talk about that for a second.
Sure.
I'll jump to that part in my notes. The film beautifully avoids any sort of cheap reuse of franchise characters.
Yeah,
The fan service thing you mentioned.
Yeah.
We get a cameo, maybe a 45-second cameo from Specs and Tucker.
Yeah, that's like the most fan servicey bit, but it's perfect.
It also works.
It's so good.
Because you want to know what happened to them.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
Because we've seen them
because
go
we're
through.
invested in them as characters. Yeah.
Right. So it's not fan service because it serves the story, because you're doing that thing of trying to jog their memories, and that's part of it.
It also is great because in the first two movies, that pair, along with Elise and Carl, like serve this exposition, like mentor, like giving you the background info role. And because they're not here for this movie, we need to tap into that somehow for Dalton and Chris, his roommate / friend, figure out what's going on. So I think this is perfect. And it's like updated for, the 2020s and finding this great YouTube video, and, it's perfect.
It was such a focused finale for the franchise where you're exploring and resolving like this one central relationship of the series between Josh and Dalton. So you have kind of a minimal but strategic use of Rose Byrne. She's as Renee.
Which is interesting because she's so central in the first movie especially, but also in the second movie.
But the family's so split up here that
Right.
wouldn't really work with the story they were trying to tell.
Well, exactly. And just like Insidious Chapter 2, we move away from, like, in the first Insidious, we're focusing on Dalton. In Chapter 2, we move away from Dalton and we focus more on Josh. And so here, we move away from Renee, who was so central in the first two, and now we're focusing mostly on Josh and Dalton together.
And they used Lorraine in the same way, where you don't have Barbara Hershey there, but you have some archival footage, and you have the picture of her that Dalton draws. You have her as almost the initiating, the event that begins the film.
Right. She kind of like she starts everything. She's the catalyst.
Right. So she's still essential to the story.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad we didn't see her in the further.
Oh my
and
goodness.
That wasn't like the thing where she shows up at the end and she shepherds them through something. That would have felt cheap.
Yeah, I'm like, and Elise is also there. Yeah, that would have been bad. None of
the appearances from the old franchise characters felt like memes.
No,
they weren't Easter eggs.
Yeah.
It had none of the problems of other sequels.
It was serving the story.
Exactly.
It was so story focused.
That's the guiding light here. And because we've spent so much time with these people and gotten such a wonderful sense of them as human beings, the stakes are pretty intense.
Yeah.
Regardless of who dies, them going through this shit again is rough for us. It's difficult to watch.
Yeah.
And when you have that music, you've got Joseph Bishara back as Lipstick Face Demon, which we'll get to. And of course, he's back as the composer. It just kicks everything up a notch. The music is as stellar and distinctive as the creature design is, as the family dynamic is. It all just works. But the thing that we kind of touched on as we were walking out of the theater here is that this third mainline movie here has so much more character work than, I guess, what you'd call horror, especially compared to the ratio of the James Wan entries. But every scare that you did get in this movie, it was a 100% hit rate.
Oh, my God.
I was sitting next to you. And I've seen a million horror movies sitting next to Maggie. This movie scared the shit out of you.
I
could
my
feel
mind.
it.
I literally screamed at one of them.
Yes.
And I don't usually scream.
No.
I'll gasp. I'll kind of go like, huh. But I literally screamed at one of them. And in a theater, in a public setting, I felt so bad for the guy sitting next to me. I was like, I'm sorry, I screamed.
And
so your point there was like, I want to make sure that your point was clear. It was that there's all this great character work, even more so than is usually in a horror movie, but also it was still really, really scary. It wasn't just like, oh, well, it was kind of more about characters and it was kind of scary. Like, it did both of those things really well.
It reminded me of the choice to completely cut Lipstick Face from Chapter 2.
Right,
Because, of course, the intense character focus, it was incredibly satisfying as the third movie 10 years later to wrap up this long-running franchise that I feel so invested in. I liked that there was a strong character focus because I'm really invested in them. I know their lore. I know their history. But then the scares that were there had such a brutal, delicious buildup. Like, that might be my greatest compliment to Patrick Wilson here. It's agonizing the way he builds up the scary scenes
Oh my
here.
God, yeah.
And it like, compare it to the ruthlessness of the character work. A lot of those scenes are pretty strongly written in that you move fast and hit hard. And the movie only slows down when it's preparing to scare the shit out of you. But the scares that are there, they're beautifully directed. They're very powerful, but they use that classic Insidious minimalism.
Oh yeah,
the what we call cheapness.
That's
in a good
true.
way.
They're not that nuts. Like
A figure getting closer through a blurry window.
Man, I loved that one. That was so great.
A light bulb is red, and then you find out it's because
there's blood on the light bulb.
There's blood smeared on the light bulb.
We get the return of the bloody handprint.
You get freaky art. You get suddenly open doors where you weren't expecting them, and you didn't see them open, but oh no, the closet's open.
Yeah.
And it works.
It works so
It
well.
works.
Honestly,
and it works
like,
without James Wan and Leigh Whannell.
The most expensive one is probably like the one that made me scream, which is the ghost of Josh's father coming through the window. Because it's been built up, like that's why it's so scary, is because he's doing that memory game and you keep seeing the figure behind the things, and then he so coming through the window, that's a big special effect. But like other than that, all the other scares are very economic, as you said.
Even that one, because it is gradual, because it is eerie, because it is cheap until the glass moment, I guess.
Yeah.
It all exists within that visual language that's been established. You buy it. It feels cogent to what we've developed here.
Well, right. It works so well with like thinking about when Josh was a kid and the old lady creeping up on him over time and like slowing in closer and closer. So the same thing is happening with his father.
But the best scare of the movie was a beautiful, unexpected callback to Chapter 2.
Oh, which one?
The MRI.
How is that a callback to Chapter 2?
Because we spend half of Chapter 2 in the freaky hospital.
Oh, I see.
Talk about the MRI.
Oh my God. Yeah.
You curled up.
This was the scariest one.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you haven't seen the movie, we're ruining it.
You should have stopped by now.
But it's the one where Josh is getting an MRI and he's in the machine and the power turns off, which is so like on paper, like, oh, that's kind of cheap and like, oh, it's all dark now, what's going to happen? But there's something about how long the scene is and how silent it is. And then it's the creepy hands that are coming up behind Josh, but then he looks up and back and nothing's there. And then he looks forward and there's this freaky thing just crawling towards him in the MRI tunnel. It's the scariest thing I've ever seen. It was awful. I was so freaked out.
As someone who had an MRI
I was going to
recently,
say, I'm so glad that we did not see this before you had to get your MRI.
he did a good job. This was potent. I felt this one.
I felt so. Oh man, I'm really glad that you already did that MRI.
Oh yes.
Oh my God.
Another thing I want to talk about is this final movie as a natural progression of Insidious, which I think is a family story. I think the franchise is a family story.
Yes.
All three movies, they hit a bunch of different dynamics between the family members. But first and foremost, always is the father-son dynamic. If you're listening to our Diablo 4 episodes, same thing gets me every
That's
time.
all we're talking about, yeah.
But the second movie corrupted the father and made him the antagonist.
Yeah.
And this movie, it does riff on that formula again. But like with the Godfather comparison, where the third one is the epilogue. The third one is the examination of the shockwaves, the trauma that comes from the first two. This third Insidious movie explores the shockwaves and trauma of the shift in the second movie where Josh becomes the villain.
Yes.
Where the father is corrupted.
Yes.
But you also, at the same time, you hit the father-son dynamic from a totally new angle by having Dalton as an adult protagonist. And he's a son, of course, but he's a fully grown man now, and he's a co-lead of the movie.
Right.
So Josh is he recedes a bit, and Dalton comes to the fore.
Yeah.
Josh is on shaky ground. Dalton's on shaky ground. You're looking at them as almost equals, but you're also looking at them both as sons, and Dalton's not a father, but he's growing into a man.
They're all grappling with their own relationships with their own fathers and
musical
as sons.
chairs.
And
Right.
it's very messy. And again, it's like the timelines that are playing throughout all these movies, especially in this one. Like, there are like 3 layers of time happening in this movie, if not more.
Right.
And so again, it's playing with that complexity, especially because Josh sees what is, I guess, the ghost of his father, but it's when his father is younger than Josh is now. And
Right.
so that and also he looks a lot like Dalton. They have the same fucking haircut. And so that also
Great
makes
choice.
it fun. And like when he came through the window at first, I thought it was Dalton. And I thought, is this like,
which is intentional.
Is Dalton going to die later? And this is what we're seeing. So, yeah.
And I think it's an expansion of that idea of doubling that we used in the first movie with sets and locations. In the second movie, we started to use with people and with flashbacks. Here we do it with the father and son thing.
Yeah.
Where you have Josh spend his half of the screen time. Sometimes he's a father grappling with that identity. And the other half, we now get to see him truly as a son. As you get the new wrinkle of his dead father, the mysteries that unravel from his father's absence. Absence, not abstinence. That would make it a very short movie.
That'd be really interesting.
But it makes this franchise even more of a generational story, such that the way the film wraps up, it feels truly complete now. You start with these men having disorder. Every generation there is such disorder, whether it's Josh's dad, Josh, or Dalton. But by the end of the movie, all three generations are restored and whole.
Yeah.
So it feels like a finale, not by some easy, cheap way of everyone dies at the end, but because they resolve everyone's storyline in a way that feels true to their characters.
And in a way that doesn't doesn't contradict what happens in the second movie. Because at the end of the second movie, what seems like they wrap everything up because they say, okay, great, we're going to forget everything, we're going to move on from this. And in the third movie, without like delegitimizing the second movie, it says, actually, forgetting and repressing memories is what got us in this shit in the first place, because that's what Josh's mother did with him.
Right.
And so that says, actually, let's not do that, and let's not end our story that way this time. Let's wrap it up in a different way. But again, it doesn't cheapen what happens in the second one at all.
And
it's really well done.
It not only dodges the easy or cheap or boring or obvious ending, it teases that and then feints in the other direction. You have a moment towards the end of the film, if you really don't want to be spoiled, you got to stop at this point.
Please, dear God.
The ending teases Josh's big paternal sacrifice. He has his Hodor moment.
Yes.
But the way the movie pivots to the much harder task of living and continuing to repair the relationship with his family, with his ex-wife, who I imagine they'll get back together.
Oh, you think so?
I think so. I hope so. And the relationship with Dalton. The movie ends, I can't totally call it a happy ending, but it is hard fought and hard won. It is not a loss, and it feels earned. It doesn't feel easy, even though it's positive. There's a grimness. There's a truth to it, but it ends on that note that all of these films hit in their most beautiful moments, and I cry at all three. This ending totally got me.
Oh, really?
Because it is resilient and hopeful. When he sees the painting in Dalton's dorm room, how does that not make you cry?
That was really sweet. I did really.
It's
like
beautiful.
That was really, really good.
So to go back to a couple elements before we wrap this up.
I was gonna say there are some other things about this movie that make it so great.
I want to go back to the doubling thing we mentioned, because we sort of started to get into that.
Yeah.
Things we double in this movie. We double both of the previous movies. We fold back on everything that happened there. We introduce this new dorm room, which is a really interesting spare set that I, again, feel like we really explore.
It's great. I love the dorm room. It's perfect.
We ring it out. We get it in real time, and we get it in the further. But also, in those first few scenes when Josh is dropping off his son at the school where he went.
Oh, it's the school where he went.
I think so, because he was in that frat.
Oh, but frat through can be national. But
it's
you
not
might be
confirmed.
Right. You might be right.
But regardless, I think it works because the way Josh walks through this college, there's such a wistfulness, such a yearning, such a loss of youth and innocence. And he knows his son has lost youth and innocence as well. But it almost feels like we're seeing young Josh go through college, or like he's in the further going through the college that he went to, and he's seeing this sort of poisoned, ruined imitation of it. So we get that kind of metaphorical triple, quadruple down doubling here. And in the realm of the further, when we're in the demon's realm, I'm sure you noticed this, we encounter all of these like recreations of past pivotal moments Like you see where Dalton hid when he talked through the can and went back into the further to rescue his dad.
Yes.
You see all of these little like vignette, kind of like installation art representations of the pivotal moments in the previous movies.
Yeah.
And that, it foregrounds the interest in memory that this legacy sequel prioritizes.
Yes, right. And the idea of reactivating recovering your lost memories.
But we even play with the concept of doubling. We double on doubling because we play with the further here. In a way we never have before. We get to see Dalton experiment with his ability to do the astral projection thing.
Yeah.
Where he like messes with his roommate and then tells her about it.
Yes. It's very strange. Yeah, it's unlike anything that's been done in the movies before.
It feels youthful.
Yeah,
in a way that
he is.
A concerned parent to a young child couldn't.
Right, exactly. But he's just like a 19-year-old kid trying to figure it out and at this point doesn't know anything about this because those memories are still repressed.
Like he's testing boundaries like you do as a teenager. He's kind of like testing the rules of the world,
he's like, tee-hee.
pushing the limits.
Just being a little menace.
And it reminded me of what we talked about with The Empire Strikes Back, where we kind of came to the conclusion here that all the best sequels have this enthusiastic what-if element that drives the story. Of if I got to be in this world, what would I do? What would happen if the ship broke and nothing worked and they lost the whole time and they were in this chase and Darth Vader won, and like that movie is so satisfying because it feels like it comes from an imagination captured by the original. And for this being the first movie that's not written by or directed by that original team, it very much feels like Scott Teems, who was the new writer brought in here. I feel his love and passion for this world.
Me too.
But he doesn't recreate the original. He has the confidence and curiosity that made the second movie such a dynamite sequel.
Yeah.
And I think this one stands right next to that one.
Totally. Yeah, like this movie has its own feel and like visual language and style like that comes with like you said, Patrick Wilson's directing and this different script, but it still totally belongs in the world and it feels honorific of the originals.
Yes.
And I think that's great.
Speaking of the originals, let's talk about the Lipstick Demon for a second.
Let's do
because
it.
We haven't talked about this part yet, so I don't know how you feel about his use in this movie. But
I felt great about it.
This was by far my most anticipated and feared component of this film.
We were really worried it was going to be about the old woman from the second one, who is fantastic, by the way. We didn't talk about her. He is so terrifying.
The Black Bride.
The Bride in Black.
Bride in Black.
Absolutely terrifying, right?
Yes,
in the second one. But like that story is complete. We understand like the whole origin of that character and who they are. And to re-explore that would have been cheap here. And so we were and because we missed the Lipstick Demon in the second one. Again, I think not including it was probably the right choice, but it was a bold choice and we missed him. We were like, oh, I really hope the Lipstick Demon is in this one. And it was good.
And I try to do a media blackout for everything I'm interested in now.
Yeah, Cam didn't watch the trailer.
I don't do trailers. I mean, I read stuff, but that's sort of different.
Yeah.
But I don't watch trailers. I try not to look at posters or any of that stuff.
It's very funny. Every time we see a movie and the Oppenheimer trailer comes on, Cam has to look down.
I look away.
He doesn't want to watch it.
Of course. I don't want to see the images. I don't want to be spoiled.
It is annoying. I've seen that trailer like 10 times now.
Anyway. I didn't know if the Lipstick Demon was in this movie. So I was so worried. I was so excited to see him. And of course, he's delightful as ever.
Yeah.
But I'm so happy that they didn't explore him with an origin story.
That's so not what that character needs.
Right, but that's such the temptation.
I know, especially because we kind of do that with the Bride in Black.
Look what they did with Pennywise in the second It movie.
Right, yeah, exactly. But like the Bride in Black, it makes sense because she was a real person.
Yeah.
And who like lived and did like these awful things, and her mother did these awful things, and then she died.
Right.
And now is a ghost. But the Lipstick Demon is different.
So then,
and that's the whole like idea in the first movie is this thing is like much deeper and freakier and more powerful than these other entities that I've had experience with. And so exploring his origin story would have been bullshit. And I was so worried because of the title about the red door, and I thought it was going to be like that was going to be like the entrance into like the world where this demon is from, and we're going to explore all the lore of this, and that's so not what this franchise needed. So I was a little nervous about that, and then lo and behold, it was all fine.
Like, imagine a version of this movie where we see this tragic black and white backstory of him being this random like circus guy from the 18th century.
Oh my god.
It would sort of break the character.
It would ruin it, because then he's not a demon anymore. He's
Exactly.
just a ghost. He's just a person, and that's not scary.
When we called this demon earlier in the discussion biblical, I think I really understood what I meant by that association after watching this film, because this lipstick-faced demon, who does not talk, who does not explain himself, and is barely ever on screen.
We don't even get its name.
No. No, you get 2 nicknames.
Yeah, it's not Payman or whatever. Like, we don't ever get a name.
If you added up his screen time in this movie, it's, I don't know, 30 seconds?
I was going to say, like, maybe a minute. Maybe.
But probably not even that,
Yeah,
honestly. It felt like way less than even the first movie.
Yeah, because we already know.
To their credit, though, it kept this character feeling biblical, meaning the character feels eternal. Demons should feel larger than life. They should feel untouchable, menacing, and particularly inhuman. Like, this thing is interested in Dalton because it's an animal that knows the smell of its prey. It's tuned into Dalton and has been since he was a kid.
Yeah.
I'm sure this demon has many other meals that he's hunting at the same time.
Sure, yeah.
But
he's got other things to do.
Yeah, but he keeps an eye out, and he keeps this little dungeon ready for Dalton if he comes ready. But there's no special relationship between him and Dalton. He doesn't have pictures of Dalton framed on his wall.
Yeah, he's not a Saw character or
Right.
from Pretty Little Liars.
It's restraint. You have to
Yeah.
maintain that distance, that mystery, that majesty of a character like this to make him a true demon character, to make him feel as distant as a woodcut. I love when demons in movies like Sinister, when they're introduced via like someone searching online and looking at woodcuts and seeing how out of reality this thing is, that we only have these sketches from hundreds of years ago because you couldn't possibly capture it on film.
Right.
This lipstick demon has to stay remote. It has to be Michael Myers in the first Halloween without the bullshit brother twist of the second one.
Yeah,
The demon is sparing, he's immortal, he's distant, and so he is terrifying.
I was going to say, if you look at like medieval woodcuts or sculptures or paintings or drawings of demons and devils, there isn't a whole lore explaining who they are and where they came from. They're meant to look otherworldly because we have no explanation for them. They are beyond our understanding and beyond our comprehension, and so beyond our world. So yeah, doing a backstory wouldn't make sense for this creature. I also noticed that they sort of aged him, or they evolved him a little bit.
Yes.
Like, it's very much the same design. Like, they didn't change the design, but I could tell it had changed a bit in its coloring, in the way his face looks. Like, he's sort of been updated. Like, he's had an iOS update. Do you know what I mean?
He also seemed older, more scaly, more rotten. He was like picking at the flakes on his
exactly.
his skin.
He's sort of starting to
He's like
crumble.
molting.
Yeah, right. Which I think makes sense for the time that has passed, and what ends up happening in the end is he's able to be kept out.
And we
have more power over him.
Right. There's almost a desperation to him, like an animal that's sickly because it hasn't fed.
Right. So it's like clinging to life.
And that feeds that desperation, the hunger that he goes
and
after
that's
Dalton
what
with.
Elise says, is that these things cling to life because they want so desperately to live.
And I felt that yearning from this character in a way I haven't before. He always seemed cocky. He was, doing his nails.
And be like, tee hee hee. And this time he's hungrier.
Yes. He felt rabid. Even though I think it's the least we've seen of him.
Yeah.
Between this and the first one. Obviously, he's not in the second one.
Right.
But the thing I want to end this discussion on, and I saved this one for last because I know you'll enjoy it.
Ooh, is it about characters?
No.
Can I talk about...
I mean, it doesn't have to be last.
Well, if you'd like to end on that note, we can end on that note. Because the other thing earlier you said, what makes a great sequel, or an important element in a great sequel, is either not doing new characters, or if you do new characters, they have to be minimal or really, really good. And this movie adds Chris, the roommate, and she's fantastic.
Loved her.
She was perfect because, Dalton's off at school by himself. And so he needs somebody to interact with and to bounce off of and to talk to, you know. And she is so good. it was so nice. I mean, this is a big trend now, but so it's not that like unique, but so nice to see a situation like that where 10 years ago they would have made that a romance, and that's just not, there's no room for that in this story. Do you know what I mean? They introduced a slight possibility of there being romance between them, but it's so not the point. It's so much more about like just this like the weird friendship and bonding that you do with your freshman college roommate, like with,
sure.
with like the first person you meet in college,
Yes.
like, which is you and me.
Well, sure.
Basically. So what does that tell us?
We'll peek behind the curtain. Right?
Yeah. But like that, like intense bonding you do. This is me revealing that I have no romantic feelings for you. By the way.
That's all right.
that would be unfortunate. No, but like there's like that intense bonding, even though they're like totally different from each other, would probably never be friends like organically without like being thrust into this situation together. But she's so like interesting and funny and helpful, but like also feels like a weird 19-year-old. You know, I thought she was excellent.
She fit into the world.
She
was
did.
tuned to that perfect frequency of this franchise. She had heart. She had personality. She was funny in a way that didn't undercut anything.
Exactly.
But accented it in the same way Specs and Tucker were funny in the first two.
Exactly.
She
It's
was
the right amount of humor.
like Carl was in the second movie. She was the one addition here, and she was perfect.
She was
I cannot
great.
imagine this movie without her. She was an amazing addition here.
Yeah, no, she was really, really good. I just wanted to make sure we highlighted her because I loved her.
No, I'm so glad you did that.
Yeah.
I mean, we had like 20 minutes to put these notes together. They're all half written. They're all chicken scratch I wrote down on my phone.
We're doing great. We're doing great.
The thing I want to end with here is, originally I mistook this the first time. It's about art. It's about the interest in art that this movie had. And my mistake in the first draft of these notes was thinking that was something new. And then I thought about it for 5 seconds and I realized what an idiot I was.
Okay.
This movie expands the franchise's interest in art and the exploration of the process of artistic creation. So we're building on the first two films' use of drawings, photographs, and music, where we see all of those things be important to the characters, but we also see the way that they're created and then interpreted by people, the way they're remembered, the way that they're broken down into the subconscious, into the memory, the emotions that they conjure in these people.
Yeah.
All of Dalton's art scenes at this college are shot so passionately. I'm sure you caught that as well, obviously, but the crumbling charcoal, the thick paint, getting these frenzied or patient close-ups, tracking the brush, getting these detail shots, it became this brilliant, I mean, it was directed gorgeously, but it became so relevant and enmeshed in the storytelling. It was a brilliant vector for the supernatural element.
Yeah.
It became this metaphor for things that are better left unseen or computer generated.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of the demon stuff that we see represented here through paintings
Right.
or sketches or those
Right.
Dalton scenes, which reach such a frenzy and passion that you would feel like in the first movie when you see the, cloven hooved demon thing run across the wall. I got that same high from seeing some of those art making scenes in this movie. I don't know how you feel about that compared to other movies that have documented or chronicled the creation of art, but I thought this was just unbelievable. It grounded the demons always in something physical, something historical that pulled me back to those ancient origins. And it continues this method of storytelling throughout this franchise. They used it for these scene transitions that moved perfectly between Dalton and Josh. It kept them on the same page. It kept us knowing that they were connected through this journey. And the way that ending worked.
The ending
with
was so good.
Dalton, knowing that Dalton's dad, Josh, wasn't on his dorm room wall because they were fighting.
Yes.
They just kind of didn't like each
Had
other.
a tumultuous relationship.
And that all the other family members were there. You could have guessed that that's how the movie would end. With some sort of portrait of Josh. If Josh dies, of course, he gets the honorary little portrait on the wall.
Yeah,
But the way you see that he's hanging something on the wall, and then you hear Josh in the doorway. And then instead of showing the painting, you see them see each other, and hug.
Yeah, and Josh says, "Oh, I made the wall." But
Yes.
so you know something's there, but you don't see it.
Restraint.
Restraint.
And then as you see them hug, the camera zooms out, and it's barely even in focus. I mean, you see it a little bit, but you see
don't
that
get
it's
a great shot of it. Yeah,
it's a shot of them from the first movie,
and it's in the further.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's so beautiful. It's
really
so
good.
full circle. I was a mess. It's. I feel like it resolved, as much as it resolved their relationship, it brought this intense relationship with art making that this franchise has had. I thought it honored that in the final moment of this series.
Well, definitely. And not even that. Also, the way that they're able to block out the lipstick demon and to prevent him from being part of their lives anymore is literally by painting over the door. And like, it's obviously metaphorical, and like his act of painting is like having a larger like metaphysical effect in the further, but it's again through that art making. No, I really liked that element here, because so many horror movies just do the cheap thing of, oh, the kid drew a creepy drawing. What does it mean?
Right, there's a lullaby.
Like, ooh, and like the first movie does that, right? Like it's Dalton drawing himself, and then he draws the demon, and like it's still really effective, but it's like, yeah, that's been done. But then they take that in this and they like expand it so monumentally. And I really liked the first art class scene where like she's like, tear up your painting, and like they kick the kid out. Like that's so like almost stereotypical art school, but like Dalton's so in it, and that's great because that's what a freshman art school student is like. They're
earnest.
They are earnest. They buy into that. Even that conversation he has with Chris, where she's like, "Oh yeah, you'll be really successful as an artist," like kind of joking, but you can see he kind of hopes it and thinks it. He's still like young enough to not be totally just bitter about everything and like disenchanted. Yeah.
Sure.
Anyway.
Disillusioned.
Yeah. So I thought that was great. But then like, you know, the little lesson about Goya with Saturn destroying his sons and how the artist kind of went mad. Like that was fun.
Beautiful.
And great. And I fucking love that painting. Oh. In that same scene, I just remembered I had this thought when we were talking about the first movie and I couldn't say it yet. In that same scene, when they're talking about Goya, it's a larger lesson about chiaroscuro, which is a painting technique where there's like intense light and shadow, where there's like a light source off screen out of the frame that's casting a really harsh light that creates really, really dark shadows. You see this a lot in Caravaggio, but also in like Goya and stuff like that. And that style of lighting is throughout all three of these movies.
The further.
You were talking about, I forget where exactly when we were talking about the first movie, but there was something that made me think about the chiaroscuro of like how just how
the hospital?
Yeah. Oh, I know what it was. It was how we through James Wan's camera work, we're like encouraged to look in those like blank spaces and blank corners and where it is dark, right? And so you see that kind of used as, but especially in the further, the really bright light of the lantern and the really harsh shadows, and you can only see a little bit in front of you. I really liked them bringing that in. I thought that was really, really cool. And the way, and going back to just the art making as a whole, and the way that the professor encourages like sinking into your subconscious and like pulling art from out of there. I'm a sucker for that kind of thing. I think that's so interesting and fun. And the idea that the painting is creating itself and it's coming out, it's a way for, I think that's a thing that art therapists do when they're like trying to do like memory work and like pull out repressed memories, like recover memories, is through drawing and sketching and pulling out memories in that way. So I think that's really, really cool. Yeah, I liked it a lot.
And it honors some of the most powerful moments from the franchise, where you get the photograph at the end of the first movie that reveals that Josh has been possessed.
Yes.
You get Renee playing the song that she wrote at the piano. Art making, Leigh Whannell's character drawing the demon for the first time that you see it. Art making has existed throughout this franchise, and it's led to most of the scariest moments. It's the biggest element. It's the greatest weapon or tool that they use in that power of suggestion game that all great horror plays with.
Yeah.
I loved that it was so prominent in this movie, and that it was filmed with such passion and love. I could rewatch this just for the art scenes.
Yeah.
It was so good.
Do you think, I've been wondering this throughout our discussion, do you think that him ripping up the drawing of Lorraine was some kind of like because we talked about Lorraine as sort of the catalyst for everything that happens in this movie.
The inciting incident?
The inciting incident, right.
Yeah.
Do you think the inciting incident was really tearing up the drawing?
Maybe.
And like, I mean, we know that Josh has been struggling for years anyway, but he's always had shit going on.
Oh, yeah.
But like things really kick off here, obviously. So I wonder if like the tearing up of the drawing, like this changing of the way that, maybe it's broader than that, this changing of the way that Dalton thinks about his art, and it digs into his subconscious thoughts when he's creating, was part of it.
I think he's already cooking by that time.
Yeah.
I think they're both, him and Josh are both ratcheting up by that point. Like, you've got the graveside thing where you see Carl. You've got all of those elements that are building, but that is one of them that gets him closer to that boiling point.
Well, maybe it's more like it feels symbolic for Dalton specifically. Again, because he's a 19-year-old who's totally bought in to his art program, and he loves the metaphor of it, right?
Yeah.
Like you could see him like feeling devastated at first because he's so proud of that drawing, but then you can see him like, yeah, I'm gonna tear it up. Like, I'm gonna do this. Like I'm this great professor. I'm gonna like do this exercise and actually dig into my subconscious and really go for it. So maybe it's more he believes in its symbolic and metaphorical meaning, even if it doesn't actually have any weight in the story.
Because that was the point of comparison with the kid who kind of self-selected out of the class, was that he believed in his artwork too much. It was so precious about it, so invested, so perfectionist, whatever, that he wouldn't rip it up. And then Dalton did, but that was almost a sign that he was really invested in the program.
Yes, right. He was focused on the process, yeah.
Right, the process is that exploration of self. It is why it's used in like therapy programs.
Well, yeah, and he, throughout the entire course of the movie, he's working on that one painting while exploring himself. So,
and it is that introspection is what triggers those memories in both him and his father that unlocks the arc of this movie. So yeah, I think that was maybe the moment where he committed. Because then when he starts doing I believe it's charcoal of the door,
it's charcoal.
That's where the demon reaches out, where you get the first time you scream during the movie.
The first scare is so scary.
Where the lipstick demon, you don't even see its face.
It's
which
just his hand.
Incredible. You see that weird scaly hand jump out and grab his arm, and that's why he bleeds on the door, which is why it's red.
Yeah.
So yes, I do think ripping the portrait of the grandmother, who is sort of the inciting incident of the whole franchise, if you look at her engaging with this thing instead of, I mean, the demon probably would have just taken young Josh.
Probably,
but she got Elise, she got Carl, sets the ball rolling here. So yeah, I think that engaging with that picture of Lorraine in that way, yeah, that is probably the moment that tipped it over. Huh.
I gotta rewatch this movie now. It was so good.
I know. I'm so impressed. I'm proud. I'm happy.
What is this like? Technically, in the franchise, it's what, like the fifth or sixth movie. Like in a sequel to a movie that came out 10 years ago. Like it shouldn't be this good. Like with a different director, also with the guy who wrote Halloween Kills.
Well, yeah, and I think Halloween is a much different franchise.
It is, and that's not a fair. But like when we read who was writing the script, we were really nervous about it, and then the script ended up being fantastic.
And huge credit to him.
Yes,
I think he wrote an incredible story
he did a great job.
That is true to this world. But I think Halloween Kills is true to Halloween 2018.
Well, that's fair.
And that was a trilogy. He produced the middle part of that, and I think he did further that story. I don't think the new trilogy was to the taste of me or you.
No.
But they are a complete trilogy.
Sure. Yeah.
So yes, I do think he's invested in both worlds.
Yeah. My point is that like this shouldn't be as good as it is.
No.
It blew me away. Maybe I'm hyping it up too much now. I just thought it was fantastic. I thought it was really, really good.
It was a true, beautiful, terrifying resolution and finale for this franchise that I have an extraordinary emotional investment in.
Yeah.
I thought this was delightful.
Yeah. Excellent movie.
It really did scare the shit out of me. I thought I would enjoy the characters, if they'd given him a noble sacrifice and he died to save his son.
I'm like, okay, that's great. Yeah,
I would have felt fine.
That's
I would have been good with that. But this is so much more than that.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's really,
it's great.
Really good.
And that's not me talking for anyone else. That's not me telling you it's the best movie in the world. That's me telling you what it meant to me.
Yeah.
And that's what the show is.
I love this series.
Yeah.
It's so good. We haven't seen the other sequels. Well, I haven't. Have you?
No. And I know one of them, because one of them was all of them, I'm sorry, until this movie were written by Leigh Whannell. And he directed the third one, I believe.
Okay.
And this one, he has a story credit on the new one.
Yes,
But
which I think was really helpful.
sure.
I think it was needed for this.
I would like to go back and watch the other two.
Yeah, I would like to as well.
I don't know why I haven't. I feel like I just got caught up in, life and stuff.
Yeah,
You lose bandwidth a little, but
Yeah.
also I think it's just that the first two felt so complete.
Yeah, you were like,
that-
I'm good. Why would I watch another one?
Yeah, and I didn't follow stuff like I do now.
Yeah.
I don't think I knew about production teams and stuff
No.
back then. So
No, we didn't.
that's my fault. But yes, I would like to watch those other two.
We'll do that at some
yeah,
point. But
I'm just what a good finale for a franchise.
man, this was good. I was gonna say sorry. This is a longer episode, but I'm not sorry.
No.
Like with these 3 movies needed this much time. I mean, it's only half an hour per movie, so we did, or a little longer. But
the
anyway.
episodes are as long as they need to be.
Yes.
Yes,
Exactly.
That's the joy of doing your own shit.
Mm-hmm.
On that note, Second Breakfast Pod on the social media networks that we respect, which is really just Instagram at this point. We're also on Substack where we have all sorts of bonus episodes, including horror episodes. We've already recorded the horror episode, which is the bonus for this month. That'll be coming out on Substack in, I think, next Tuesday at this
Wow.
point. That'll be coming out.
That's really good math on your part.
I think
I have
so.
no idea.
You know what?
We're recording
I
so...
think I'm right.
Well, I'll hold you to that. We're recording so far in advance right now. We're about to
We are.
go
We
away.
are. We're doing the work. So
Anyway.
yeah, we are bonus episodes. Get in touch with us, and we'll be back with a brand new episode. Have a great weekend. Thank you for listening.
Thank
to
you.
This.
Thank you
We've
for
enjoyed
joining
doing
us.
this. We've loved doing Summerween. I love talking about movies that I love this much. It's a lot of prep. You heard me read through these notes. I got to do a lot of work for episodes like this,
Yeah.
but they're also my favorite. So
Yeah, they're
thank you
so
for
much
listening.
fun.
And thank you, Maggie, of course, for having the conversations that form the notes and then having the discussion with
You're
me.
very welcome.
I know I get excited. I know I run away with myself, but
You sure do. I just
I
gotta.
just
I
love
just
doing
feel
this.
comfortable interrupting you, and that's just the way it is.
that's our flow,
So,
man.
Yep.
You said you didn't have any love for me, but, we've got the podcast. We've got the podcast.
That's all we need. All right. Well, thanks for being here. We'll see y'all next week.
Bye.
Bye. Maggie from the future here. Thanks for listening to our 3-part discussion on this Insidious Lambert Family saga. It was really fun to have y'all here. Let us know if you liked this multiple part video series. Maybe we'll do it again. What do you think?
It was the longest, most sweaty, difficult, intense episode we've done in years, and I loved it. I thought it was fantastic.
I was going to say, if we do this again, it'll be a lot, but
Never
we'll do
again.
it for you, dear listener. So
Yeah, if you want us to talk about a big franchise like that, we'll do the work. We'll put in the work and do the notes. But yes, this was a lot of fun. This is Cam and Maggie from the future, and now from the past, signing off.
that's confusing for me to wrap my brain around. But you know what? The multiple timelines in Insidious, it works perfectly. So
It's canon.
we planned this all along. All right, toodaloo.
Bye.